Welcome back. We've been considering some of the encounters that Jesus had with individuals in which he granted their requests based upon their faith. Today we consider another amazing passage and demonstration of Jesus' authority, power, and deity. In Matthew 9, verses 1 to 8, we read of the faith of 4 men who bring their friend to Jesus. Beginning of verse 1, I read, "So he, that is Jesus, got into a boat, crossed over, and came to his own city. Then behold, they brought to him a paralytic lying on a bed. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, 'Son, be of good cheer, your sins are forgiven you.' And at once some of the scribes said within themselves, 'This man blasphemes.' But Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, 'Why do you think evil in your hearts? For which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven you, or to say, arise and walk? But that you may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins.' Then he said to the paralytic, 'Arise, take up your bed, and go to your house.' And he arose and departed to his house. Now when the multitude saw it, they marveled and glorified God, who had given such power to men." Again, there are more things in this passage to share than we have time for right now. And we need to remain targeted on our focus on prayer as we consider these daily encouragements. So what I want you to note first in this passage is that Jesus keyed on the faith of the paralytic's friends. Jesus knows all things. He knows how and why these men brought their friend to him. Their faith and their determination was evidence for all to see. In Mark's gospel account, which I believe actually is Peter's version of the gospel, that's for another time to discuss. But in my mind, this is Peter's version when we look at Mark. We're given another detail of this event, because this house in which Jesus was at is more than likely Peter's house. This is Jesus, and we'll see this in a couple episodes from now, that Jesus uses Peter's house as his base of operations. And so in that account in Mark, we read, beginning in chapter 2, verse 3 to 5, it says, "When they came to him," that is Jesus, "bringing a paralytic who was carried by 4 men, and when they could not come near him because of the crowd, they uncovered the roof where he was. So when they had broken through, they let down the bed on which the paralytic was lying. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, 'Son, your sins are forgiven you.'" Jesus honored the faith of the friends. This faith of his friends was so determined, and that when they came to the house, they couldn't enter in because the crowds were pressing in from all over. So they went onto the roof. And back then, roofs were either made of thatch. They would have wood coming across with thatch going across, or up in that area, they would have basalt roofs, roofs that were made with stone that was cut out like tiled, and then sodded on top of it. So either way, these men would have had to do a lot of work in order to break through the roof to lower their friend in the midst of Jesus. The faith of these friends in order to bring their friend to Jesus. How important is it for you, for your friends to come to Jesus? What are you willing to do to bring them to He who can heal, to He who can forgive sins? What's really kind of neat in this passage is Jesus saw the faith of the 4 friends, and so he says to this young man, "Son, your sins are forgiven you." But then he forces this young man to express his faith as well. For he says to this young man, I say to you, therefore, take up your bed and walk. The young man had a decision to make himself, didn't he? He needed to decide whether he was going to get up off that bed, take up his bed, and then walk. Did he really believe Jesus could heal him? His friends did, and they brought him to Jesus. But then the young man had to make the decision on his own. He had to receive the forgiveness of sins that Jesus was offering. His paralysis, we would call today a conversion disorder, and where there is suppressed guilt that was manifesting itself in his body. No time to really discuss that. Other than Jesus knew that he didn't really need a physical healing. He needed to be forgiven of his sins. The young man needed to receive that. There's only one sin that will never be forgiven, that cannot be forgiven. And that's the sin of unbelief. Because if you will not believe, then you cannot receive the forgiveness that is offered you. Today, I'd like to challenge you to consider at least one friend of yours that you can begin to take to Jesus. Someone who needs to receive the forgiveness of their sins. And that you, by faith, would begin to intercede on their behalf. That you would begin to take them to Jesus. That Jesus might forgive them of their sins. Again, the place that we have in this spiritual war is an amazing thing. But remember that God desires all men to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. That's his will. He desires all men to be saved. Are you willing to emulate the faith of those four friends and to take your friend to Jesus? Take some time now to pray. Intercede on their behalf, taking their names before the Lord, asking that the Lord would draw them to himself. Have a blessed day.